Good evening and thanks so much for tuning in. This is the Money Show on ET Now and my name is Alex Matthew. This is a 1-hour show that gets you everything that you need to know about your money, how to earn more of it, how to invest it wisely, and also how to spend and get the best bang for your buck. And this show caters to everybody, to every age group, whether you're just about starting up, if you've spent a good decade or so earning money, and if you're close to retirement or even have retired, we'll cover everything that you need to know. On today's program, we'd like to focus on those that are just entering the workforce and the fact that these Gen Z individuals are very different from even the millennials that went before them, millennials like myself, and certainly the ones that went before me. Their spending habits are different, the way they look at investments are different. We'll look at how you, if you're listening in, and if you are in fact from Gen Z, how you can approach your finances. We'll also talk to Pankaj Tibrewal from Kotak Mutual Fund about a couple of funds that he manages. And finally, on our Travel Thursday segment, we'll take you to Gujarat. Let's start with the first conversation today, and let me introduce my first guest, Harshvardhan Rumta. He is a certified financial planner and the co-founder of Rumta Securities. Thank you so much, Harsh, for joining in. And I want to start by asking the fact that generational gaps are in fact narrowing. The way that Gen Z thinks is very different from how millennials think. And in fact, those that went before think very, very differently. Have you experienced that in the advice that you dispense and the people that you speak to?
Yes, Alex. In fact, any person from the Gen Z, as you call them, if you talk to them right now, you will see that they're you're bubbling with a lot of enthusiasm. And they have a much larger risk appetite. Most certainly, they're looking at products in different manner in which the earlier generation would look at. So yes, there is a lot of changes in the approach in the way you even transact. So this is essentially got to do with the kind of information that is available in public domain right now. I mean, on the online mediums, on all the news channels, you will see a lot being spoken about financial planning, investments. So there is a lot of awareness created. And of course, if you look at the ease of transactions, if a person has decided or wants to do something, he has a mobile app, he just needs to open it up and dabble a little bit, and you'll get to transacting, and you'll be right there. So these things have propelled the Gen Z in that context to sit back and just simply start investing. Besides, of course, in fact, the pandemic and the lockdown, this has given an opportunity to people to sit down, look at information, and I've spoken to so many people who said that they had nothing better to do during the lockdown, so they started investing. So these things are a reality. What I have gotten to understand when I speak to these younger fellows is that it's there's certain kind of products that they're doing into. One is the trading in shares. They are dabbling in cryptocurrencies. So these are one of the elements that they're getting into. Some of them are doing this for the sake of getting a kick out of it. I mean, they like the fact that they're making some money. And what is worrisome at the same time is that market, since lockdown, when these people have got into investing or doing buying cryptocurrencies, etc., markets have been one way just going up. So they haven't really seen the other side of equity markets and the unregulated products like crypto. So that kind of worries me a little bit. But it seems that FOMO is the driving force behind them to just participate in anything and everything that their friends are possibly doing.
That's a great word. FOMO is what is driving a lot of people, including millennials, into the markets. And what you're saying is absolutely right in that they haven't really been burnt. They haven't burnt their fingers, except maybe a few in the cryptocurrency market. We'll get to that in a bit. But for those that are starting out, and let's assume that we're talking about 21, 22-year-olds, somebody who's just entering the workforce. Harsh, I wish that somebody was there to tell me when I was starting out to start investing just a little bit. Or setting just a little bit of money aside. Maybe, of course, our paychecks were very different, but even if it was 500 or 1,000 rupees, it would have made a huge difference. So for somebody who's starting out, what advice would you give to these individuals? Not necessarily about investments, but about managing their money.
So Alex, if you were to look at it in such a manner that, when you get your first paycheck, there are certain deductions that happen even out of your first paycheck. So how an individual should look at as and when they get their first paycheck is that set aside a portion of that money that you get in hand away for some requirements that will be short term, medium term, or long term. So you will have certain requirements in life which are bound to come, whether you like it or not. So why not you set aside certain portion of your income and put it aside for those requirements in the future? Now, this is a golden chance that you have, before you, because your responsibilities are going to be lesser at this juncture. All that you're doing with your money right now is kind of, enjoying it, spoiling yourself, which is rightly so. I mean, if you're working hard for it, you have all the right in the world to spend on yourself, enjoy that money, and also at the same time spoil yourself. However, there is one small element that you need to keep in mind. If you just set aside a small portion of your income, okay, it need not take away all the enjoyment that you're going to have. So we're not saying that do it at the cost of enjoying your money. No. So about say 20% of what you get in hand, you need to get into the habit of putting it aside for future needs, because those future needs are going to come whether you like it or not. So might as well be prepared for it. And this small percentage that you set aside, it's not going to take away anything from you. I mean, you will be able to enjoy yourself. So use the most powerful weapon that you have to your side, which is time. I mean, and how time can help you multiply your money. I mean, it's a phenomena that you need to understand and use that to your advantage, especially if you're in the mid 20s or early 20s for that matter. Use time to your side and you see how you create wealth over a period of time.
Absolutely, and that momentum that you get and that velocity that you can generate once you have that bit of money that you've accumulated, right, in the early part of your career or in the early part of your earning years, Harsh, is invaluable. You can't even put a value to it. So how does one start, and can you illustrate that? Can you explain how these are the real golden years of someone's career?
I've been using this example and a calculation on several occasions, and I'm sure it has impacted many people who are listening in. So, if I may just take an example of two individuals, say Sita and Geeta. I mean, there are two individuals, two girls who are just getting into workforce at age 25. They both joined the workforce together. Well, Sita on one hand, said that, okay, I will put aside 1,000 rupees every month from my first paycheck. The moment she gets her salary, she puts aside 1,000 rupees and invest that into for long term. Say she just says that, okay, I'm going to let this money, lie around and, get invested every month for the next 30 years. Geeta, on the other hand, says that, look, I've just got into a job. I need to enjoy myself. I don't want to think about investing. What is long-term retirement? I don't like all that kind of conversation. So she does not do anything immediately, but she says, okay, and she starts for 5 years later. Now, what happens is, if you look at their age of 55, so 30 years from today, so when Sita started at age 25, Geeta started at age 30. Now, at age 55, when you look at the corpus that these both girls would have accumulated over a period of time, and if you just to extrapolate this at a return of say about 14%, and on an SIP long-term equity investing, it is quite possible to generate about 14% kind of compounded return. So at age 55, Sita would have accumulated a corpus of about 54 lakhs, wherein Geeta, because having delayed it by 5 years, accumulates a corpus of about 26 lakhs. So the difference, what I'm trying to highlight, this being the golden chance that all people just getting to workforce, the early 20s or mid 20s have to their side, is time. Just a 5-year delay of starting with 1,000 rupees per month has cost Geeta more than half of the corpus that she could have accumulated otherwise. So the earlier you start, the better. Otherwise, the cost of delay is going to be working it has a multiplying effect over a longer period of time. In this case, a 30-year period has eroded Geeta's corpus by more than half. So that's the advantage that we're talking about, compounding, the power of time that you have to your side.
Absolutely. And Harsh, in the example that you quoted, you were talking about just 1,000 rupees. And what really is that 1,000 rupees, right? There are people who go out and spend this on one night out. In Mumbai, for example, you would spend more on the food that you eat in a day. And plus, you're talking about 25 years as a starting point, and a lot of people start earlier than that. So that should just put things in context. In fact, Harsh has been a little conservative in his estimates, if anything. But Harsh, do stay with us. We have to slip into a short commercial break. There's more that I would like to speak to you about, specifically about the investment habits, so-called investment habits of Gen Z. Do stay tuned, viewers. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching The Money Show, and we were speaking about how Gen Z, that is the people that are now entering the workforce, and remember, these are individuals that have been born after 2000. We're having interesting conversation with Harshvardhan Rungta. Harsh, now these are the people that are entering the workforce. We were talking about the benefits of starting early. But I also want to talk a little bit more about the proclivity of these individuals, and perhaps you've spoken to a few people. I know that you have a very young son as well, and you've been teaching him a few good money habits. What advice would you give to parents of teenagers as well, just before they enter the workforce? How do they inculcate those money habits?
Well, Alex, this is another very interesting area. So when you have teenagers as your children, I mean, what you need to do is just get them familiar with handling money. And I mean, at this point in time, you don't have to really look at, inculcating the habit of investing. So it's just getting familiar with money. So which means let them, be comfortable with handling money themselves, which is, the expense side of it. They should be comfortable spending money. How you spend money is also very important habit as you go further. So one is, of course, when you give them a pocket money or a stipend, anything that you may call it, there is some allowances that you're giving them every month. When they get that money, ask them to again set aside certain portions, which will be 10%, 20%. Need not invest it at this juncture. If they do it, great. If they don't, it's fine. Just ask them to put some money aside for some expenses that may come up in the future. So you're allowing them to spend this money, but may not be today, but maybe in future. So they may have a birthday to attend, which they want to give gifts, and that may not happen every month. It will happen once in a couple of months. So they need to save up for that. The rest amount of money, they can most certainly go ahead and spend it, because allow them to spend. Spending is a very important financial habit. So once they spend that money, and they will be then they will start budgeting for itself. So these are small things that you need to introduce to them and give them the independence. Do not monitor it. Let them make mistakes, because the stakes are very small. I mean, even if they make mistakes, they will learn out of it. The cost of learning is going to be most important at this juncture. So the idea is, let them get familiar with handling money, and then slowly and gradually introduce the concept of investing. Investing not for the purpose of creating wealth, but from a habit point of view, because the sums are going to be small. It could be 100 rupees, it could be 500 rupees, it could be a couple of thousand. So idea is not to create wealth, just to make sure that they get a habit of saving. Then when they come into the workforce, then of course, then there is some serious amount of money that we're talking about. Until then, they will be habituated with this process. When they get into getting real income, then they will start investing in the real sense.
The reason I wanted to talk about this, Harsh, and just before I ask you the next question, because it sets the context. Because I think to a large extent, a lot of individuals, a lot of young people have a different mindset to what we had, at least to what I had when I was growing up. And a lot of them have entrepreneurial ambitions. They want to start their own businesses. They want to be successful on their own terms. What advice would you give such individuals who are not really looking to earn an income through a salary?
This is another very, very tricky situation, because, when you're committing yourself to a journey like this, and, when there is going to be a lot of, because it's a business, there's going to be a lot of capital requirement. So one is, of course, whatever capital that you have, you will have to commit yourself entirely, that capital and yourself, to that venture. Even if you look to raise funds, no venture capitalist or any angel investor is not going to put in money until you put your own money as well. Your skin needs to be in the game. So essentially, you will notice that all the liquidity that you would have at this point in time, you will need to plow it into the business that you're planning to run. There's two things that you need to be extremely careful about. One is, have certain contingency fund which could last you for a couple of months in case everything goes bad, just to meet your mandatory living expenses. So you will have food, clothing, and shelter, essentially to take care of, even if this business that you're trying to, or a venture that you're trying to put through is not going to be successful. You need to have some leeway, a couple of months where you can survive before you get onto something else. So that contingency fund for your basic mandatory living expenses need to be made available, which could be, say 3 months or 6 months of your basic mandatory living expenses. The other element which you need to be very careful about and make sure that you do it is buy adequate health insurance. Because irrespective of what age you are, I mean, there could be any instances of hospitalization, and that can really drain out all the capital, all the liquidity that you have. So ensure that you have a good health insurance to take care of any unplanned, any eventuality which leads to hospitalization or illnesses, and have some basic contingency fund for mandatory living expenses for the next 3 to 6 months at least. Beyond that, as I said, there is not much in the hands of a person who's getting onto this journey, and they will have to commit themselves completely to the venture. So there is not much they can do other than this initially to begin with.
Absolutely. And particularly to that health insurance bit, because you don't have the safety net that is provided by group cover, it becomes even more imperative to buy that policy that you just spoke about. Now, coming to a point that I think is really the crux of the conversation when we're talking about young people, Harsh, is that because of the gains that certain products, and here I'm talking about cryptocurrency, have provided, they have jumped in full tilt, whereas certain older people are a little bit more conservative and maybe have approached it a little differently. What advice would you give to somebody who wants to have just a tad bit of an experience in the cryptocurrency space, but still wants to maintain, or should ideally maintain, a balance with respect to their portfolio in terms of the risks that they should ideally be taking?
Well, Alex, in that context, I'm from the older generation. I do not have a single transaction done in cryptocurrencies till date. So I don't even know how it functions, quite honestly. So in that context, I'm from the older generation in your description, and I'm happy to be there. So, the only thing that I would say at this juncture, Alex, would be that, be very mindful of what you're doing, not to get carried away, not to invest into or, participate in any product which is unregulated. So cryptocurrencies being one, I mean, as much as it may look that, blockchain is the future and all that, we understand blockchain is future, but cryptocurrency is a different thing altogether. I mean, how does something derive a word currency? I mean, I don't even understand that. It becomes a medium of exchange. And it is a sovereign right. It's always the governments which are supposed to issue currencies. Otherwise, it just becomes free for all. Everybody becomes an RBI and mints their own currencies. It just leads to chaos, according to me. So, my advice would be to not get carried away and invest into any unregulated product. I mean, if you are a high risk taker and you have that high adrenaline, I mean, there are enough products in the regulated markets also where you can participate and, satisfy that urge of yours. You do not need to go into unregulated markets. So that's one distinction that I would like to, highlight for everybody listening in. It's not only cryptocurrencies for that matter. I would say any product which is unregulated and not recognized by your government, you should avoid participating in that activity. I mean, when we talk about risk taking, now that also you have to understand carefully. So, participating in an adventure sport is one thing, and committing suicide is another one. So, sometimes in our quest to earn more or to take more risks, because we just want to take more risks, it's just that we get bored of doing whatever we are, doing continuously. We want to take more risk, and that is why we venture into areas, just for the sake of it. So, as I said, if you're planning to jump off a cliff, I mean, it would be stupid to not have safety equipment on yourself and then jump. So there is a difference between, participating in adventure sports and committing suicide. So take risk, but obviously with the regulations in place, with certain safeguards, certain, processes to follow, and then you take risk. So that's the, essential idea. More importantly, because we're talking about Gen Z in that context, it's about habit forming. If you're going to get into these kind of activities early on in your life, I mean, this forms the way you will treat money going further. If this is how you're going to do things in your 20s, you don't expect to do different things in 30s and 40s. So be very mindful of the fact that whatever you do today is going to be laying the foundation for how you behave in the future. If you're going to be reckless and careless with your money and just do anything that you want, it's unlikely that you will realize that you need to be, respecting your own money, your hard work, and your income. So do things within the limits, understand the nuances of every product, go into the details, treat your income with respect because you're eventually you are working hard for it, and form good habits, however big or small they may be, at the beginning itself.
Absolutely. Harsh, it's great advice that you have just given out, and I hope that a lot of people benefit from it. It's been a pleasure, as always, speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure.
All right. Now, on that note, we are out of time on this edition of The Money Show, but there's lots more coming up in just a short while, so do stay tuned. This is ET Now.